My name is Elias. For 3 years, I worked as a fire lookout for the National Park Service. My job was simple: sit in a 60-foot tower, watch the horizon for smoke, and radio in weather updates. It was the perfect job for a loner. Or so I thought. What I'm about to tell you isn't in any official report. If you look up the logs from October 1998 for the Blackwood Ridge Tower, you'll find a gap of 3 days. They call it a radio malfunction. It wasn't a malfunction. I turned the radio off. I had to, because the thing on the other end wasn't human. This is the story of why I never went back to the woods. The season was ending. It was late October, and the tourists had long since packed up their RVs and headed back to the suburbs. The trails were empty. The air had that biting, metallic smell that comes right before the first snow. My tower, Blackwood 4, was 14 miles from the nearest trailhead. No electricity, just a propane heater and a solar setup for the radio. The isolation usually felt like a warm blanket, but that week, something felt off. It started with the wildlife. Usually, the forest is noisy. Jays screaming, squirrels chattering, the rustle of deer in the brush. But on Tuesday morning, everything just stopped. The birds vanished. The deer trails were empty. It was like the forest was holding its breath. That night, a storm rolled in off the Pacific. It wasn't a normal storm. The clouds were bruised purple and black, moving unnaturally fast. By sunset, the wind was howling around the catwalk of the tower, shaking the structure so hard my coffee cup rattled across the table. I locked the hatch, turned up the propane lantern, and settled in to read. That's when I heard it. At first, I thought it was a branch blowing against the support beams. But we keep the perimeter clear for 50 yards. There are no branches that high up. I lowered my book. The wind howled, masking the sound. Then, a lull. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It was coming from the trap door, the floor beneath my feet. I froze. Being 14 miles out, you don't get visitors, especially not in a storm like this. I grabbed my flashlight and the heavy iron poker from the stove. I walked to the center of the room and stared at the heavy wooden hatch. "Hello?" I called out. My voice cracked. "Ranger station, identify yourself." Silence. Just the wind whistling through the gaps in the windows. I told myself it was a raccoon or a bear rubbing against the pilings. I went back to my chair, but I didn't read. I watched that hatch for 4 hours until the sun came up. Day 2. The storm hadn't let up. Visibility was 0, just a wall of gray fog pressing against the glass. I felt like I was in a submarine at the bottom of the ocean. I tried to radio dispatch at 8 a.m. for the morning check-in. "Dispatch, this is Blackwood 4, over." Nothing but static. The storm must have messed with the repeater on the adjacent peak. I tried again. "Dispatch, do you copy? I'm getting heavy interference." Then the static broke. A voice came through, crystal clear. "Dispatch, this is Blackwood 4, over." I blinked. It was my voice, not a recording. The inflection was slightly different, like someone practicing how to sound like me. "Dispatch?" I asked, confused. "Is this a playback?" The radio crackled. "Dispatch, is this a playback?" My blood ran cold. It wasn't an echo. The delay was too long, and the tone, it was mocking. "Who is this?" I shouted into the mic. "This is a federal frequency." The voice changed. It dropped an octave, becoming guttural and wet, like a throat filled with blood. Who is this? I slammed the radio off. My hands were shaking. I paced the small 12 by 12 room. Pranksters? Hikers with a stolen radio? No. The signal was too strong. They had to be close. I went out onto the catwalk. The wind nearly knocked me over. I shined my beam down into the darkness below. At the edge of the clearing, right where the tree line started, I saw something. It looked like a deer standing on its hind legs, but deer don't have arms that hang down to their knees, and deer don't stare up at you with eyes that reflect red in the flashlight beam. It stood there, unmoving, in the pouring rain, watching me. I rushed back inside and bolted the door. I grabbed my service pistol from the lockbox. I spent the night huddled in the corner, gun pointed at the hatch, listening to the radio I had turned off turn itself back on. By the third night, the sleep deprivation was making me hallucinate. I kept seeing movement in my peripheral vision. The thing about fire towers is that they are glass boxes. You are on display. You can't hide. If something is outside, it can see you from every angle. Around 2 a.m., the rain stopped. The sudden silence was worse than the storm. Then came the smell. It seeped in through the vents. It smelled like copper and rotting meat, like a deer carcass left in the sun for a week. I gagged, pulling my shirt over my nose. Then, a hand slapped against the glass window. I screamed and scrambled back, knocking over the table. There was nothing there, but on the glass, condensation was fading in the shape of a handprint. A handprint with 6 fingers. And it was on the outside, 60 feet in the air. I scrambled for the radio. I didn't care about the mimic anymore. I needed help. Mayday! Mayday! This is Ranger Elias at Blackwood 4. I have an intruder. I need assistance immediately. The radio lit up, but it wasn't dispatch. It was a voice I recognized. It was my mother's voice. My mother who had died 5 years ago. Elias, open the door, honey. It's cold out here. The voice was perfect. It had her warmth, her slight southern drawl, but underneath it, there was that clicking sound. Click, 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 like insect mandibles. Let me in. I brought you some soup. You're not real, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. The voice shifted instantly. It became a low, distorted growl. Open it. The entire tower shook. Something heavy slammed against the catwalk railing. Then again, it was circling the tower, running along the narrow metal walkway, banging on the glass on all 4 sides. Bang, 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 bang. It was testing the glass, searching for a weakness. I fired a shot through the ceiling just to make a noise louder than the banging. The sound of the gunshot was deafening in the small space. The banging stopped. I heard heavy steps walk to the door. The handle of the hatch jiggled a bit. I had locked it with the deadbolt and shoved a chair under the handle, but the wood groaned under the pressure. Then, silence. I sat there, gun trained on the door, until the first gray light of dawn touched the trees. I didn't wait for relief. As soon as the sun was fully up, I packed my bag. I left the heavy gear. I just took the gun, my keys, and the radio. I opened the hatch. The metal stairs rang out as I descended, my eyes scanning the tree line. At the base of the tower, the mud was churned up. There were prints. They looked like human feet, but elongated with claw marks digging deep into the soil. I ran the 14 miles back to my truck at the trailhead. I didn't stop to rest. Every time the wind rustled the leaves, I raised my gun. I felt eyes on me the entire time, a heavy, predatory gaze burning into the back of my neck. I reached my truck, fumbled with the keys, and threw myself inside. I locked the doors and started the engine. As I pulled away, I looked in the rearview mirror. Standing at the edge of the trail, just watching me leave, was a man. He was wearing a Park Service uniform. He was wearing my uniform.